I want to thank Sarah and the Association of Bowdoin Friends for inviting me to speak to you. And if you can't hear me at any point, raise your hand and scream. I'm deaf too, so I want to make sure you can hear. So here we go. I came to Bowdoin as an assistant professor of psychology in August 1979, thinking I already had an excellent liberal arts education at Douglas College of Rutgers University in New Jersey. Having painted in oils since the age of 8, I entered Douglas as a studio art major. Here's my 11-year-old attempt to be the next Cézanne, who was my favorite. Now, yeah, like you're muttering, oh, that's pretty good, right? And I might have seemed like a budding talent at age 11, but let's compare that to this 11-year-old Pablo Picasso. Yes, that Picasso, age 11. So, you know, I'm no Picasso. Upon realizing I would starve in a garret, my art major ended with my freshman year. I continued to take the English and art history courses I loved, though I saw no way to earn a living with them. My freshman composition professor, who became a world-renowned feminist literary critic, told me I was a writer. Okay, I thought, but what would I write about? And who would pay me to write? So I took a psych course. Being a clinical psychologist seemed like a bona fide profession. In the fall of my second year at Bowdoin, I attended a psychotherapy conference in Houston, Texas, where I had done my clinical internship in the Texas Medical Center. It was my introduction to postmodernism in psychotherapy. Although I had heard of postmodernism's emergence in architecture in the 1960s. According to Architectural Digest, it embodied these features: variety of shapes and materials, reference to classical motifs, use of bright colors and patterns both externally and internally, a combination of various architectural styles often mixed in unconventional ways, displays of humor or irony, and fragmentation. Here's an example. Located in New Orleans, the Piazza d'Italia was completed in 1978 following the designs of postmodernists Charles Moore and Perez architects. The public plaza is located behind the American Italian Cultural Center. So you can see the hodgepodge of styles and colors and eras and all that. Here's another example. New York City's AT&T building by architect Philip Johnson, completed in 1984, was described as, quote, the single most important architectural detail of the last 50 years. That was referring to the Chippendale pediment, which was scandalous for many. But it was seen as an indicator of postmodernism. It was designated a city landmark in 2018 because it's considered the first postmodern skyscraper. Postmodernism notably took hold in English departments in the 1970s and thereafter. French philosopher Jacques Derrida spoke of the deconstruction of the text, in that the text can be taken to mean the opposite of what it seemingly says. The intentional fallacy followed, or came about at the same time, and it meant that the meaning of the text could not be taken from the author's intentions. Authorial intentions were either unknowable or irrelevant to interpretation. So all that psychoanalytic work, application of Freud and other psychoanalysts to authors to understand their work in this postmodern turn was irrelevant because what the author actually intended didn't matter. And there are many, many versions, reader response theory, many versions of this. Postmodernism appeared in scientific psychology in the 1970s with the mandate that there could be no objective truth in any discovery. Instead, there would only be different viewpoints. Your truth, my truth, our truth, their truth. One's sociocultural setting or one's context, one's geography became dominant in determining what claims could rightly be taken as true. I'm clawing the air with scare quotes because there was no truth. And that's the bottom line of postmodernism. In psychotherapy, therapists were now to assist their patients in creating life narratives that help them attain their goals. There was no need for truth in the narratives since there was no objective truth to be had. And then I thought to myself, what if a patient's goal is to be a mass murderer? Do I help them create a narrative to attain that goal? It seems like we had at least an ethical problem. Looking back, I realized that was the start of our post-truth world. And you've probably heard that term if you watch news media, post-truth. As you will soon see, truth without scare quotes, meaning real truth, has been my mission from the time I could talk. The night I got back from the Houston conference, I went straight to the new faculty reception. There I ran into my friend and neighbor philosopher Ed Poles. Some of you may remember Ed. I babbled to him incoherently about postmodernism. How could there be no truth? How could humans be reduced to nothing more than texts, words, sentences? Seemed ridiculous. Ed knew exactly what was happening, and he was having none of it. He insisted we can know the truth about what exists to varying degrees. And so began my weekly 2-year Edwardian tutorial in the philosophy of science. Ed co-authored 4 articles with me, which I called the collected works of Heldon Poles. And he wrote comments on every page of the first draft of my 1995 book, Back to Reality, A Critique of Postmodern Theory in Psychotherapy. Don't rush to buy it. Really. Although my philosophy sessions with Ed were prominent, he was not the sole contributor to my Bowdoin liberal arts education. Having lunch every day with professors in English, languages, art, classics, physics, chemistry, biology, economics, just to name a few, broadened my horizons. For example, in the physical sciences, chemistry professor Peter Trumper taught me how to build models of organic molecules, and physics professor George Schmiedesoff took me to the MIT Magnet Lab in Cambridge, where I helped judge whether the electrons showed a phase transition. Don't ask. But I thought to myself, aha, even physics necessitates interpretive calls. In the humanities, classics professor Barbara Wyden-Boyd taught me about ancient Rome and introduced me to renowned Greek classicist Mary Lefkowitz, who taught me to take the ancient Greek gods seriously. And I do. Art history professor Cliff Olds taught me about Asian art and introduced me to Renaissance and modern art historian and critic Leo Steinberg, who taught me to pay more attention to what he called the painting's, quote, mute image, rather than what he called the meddling text of scholars. My 35-year Bowdoin liberal arts education stood me in good stead, not only in my scholarship, but also in my opinion essays, which, starting with the onset of the pandemic in 2020, have appeared in newspapers in Maine, New York, Connecticut, and Pennsylvania. And now I'm going to read 3 of those op-eds. This is my very first op-ed, published July 9th, 2020 in the Portland Press Herald, Managing COVID Anxiety in Maine with Strategies from New York's Polio Years. As an anxiety-prone native New Yorker, I should say New Yorker, and a Maine resident since 1979, I marvel at Mainers' unflappability. But with summer visitors from everywhere, even Mainers express anxiety about their heightened COVID-19 risk. During Italy's lockdown, Padua friends sought refuge in their country house in the Dolomites, where locals demanded they take their COVID germs back to the city. How heartless, I thought. Now I'm ashamed to say I understand. Born in 1950, I lived in the Bronx till 1956. Because polio was rampant in those early pre-vaccine city summers, my first 5 years were structured around avoiding polio. My polio anxiety is palpable still, and now to add to it, COVID anxiety. As first-generation children of Jewish immigrants, my parents put safety above all else. Now, this is important. Feeling safe for us could be achieved only by being safe. You can feel safe and not be safe, which can lead you to act unsafely. But then again, you can be safe and not feel safe, which can make you appear annoyingly neurotic, especially to optimists. Not being an optimist, feeling safe is not my default attitude, as anyone who knows me will tell you. But I can feel safe if I discern sufficient evidence that I am safe, or as safe as possible given the circumstances. My physician is sitting back there nodding. Here were the polio rules from the time I was 2. No drinking from in the Bronx. No drinking from water fountains or from anything but funnel-shaped paper cups set in metal holders at the soda fountain. Does anyone remember those? No sandboxes. Fine with me. I hated dirt. Certainly no swimming pools, and no sitting on public toilet seats without making a cover from toilet paper. Which rule still holds? I'm not kidding. My second or third birthday party, I'm not sure which, is the scene of my most vivid polio anxiety memory. My relatives helped me, with scare quotes, blow out the candles. They spit polio germs on my cake, I screamed, and ran into my bedroom, refusing to come out. My mother came in, said, "What's wrong?" And I told her, and she said, she promised she would scrape the icing off my piece of cake. Notice I wasn't worried about anyone else's piece of cake, just mine. No polio germs for me. The rest of you are on your own. I remain wary of icing on birthday cakes to this day. My sister's sitting here cracking up. In 1955, Uncle Sam, an actual relative, our pediatrician, vaccinated us and soon learned about the tainted batches that contained live virus. If any of you are old, that remember, the first batches had live virus, and he got the first batches because he was our physician. My parents waited in secret terror for his report. Maybe we weren't safe after all. Luckily, we were. And today, Dr. Fauci is my grown-up version of Uncle Sam. I miss his regular TV house calls, also Dr. Shaw from Maine on the radio. My hero. My husband and I were in New York City the first week in March 2020 for my 70th birthday. My sister and her partner brought hand sanitizer, masks, and gloves from Connecticut. You remember, we grew up in the same house, so yeah, the germ thing. We returned to Maine on March 9th. For the first time since moving to Maine, I'm glad not to live in New York. I don't feel that way anymore, but those few years I did. My parents' vigilance not only helped keep us safe from polio, but also helped me feel safe. Without knowing it, they were teaching us to use what psychologists call a defensive pessimist coping strategy. Think about what can go wrong in feared or anxiety-provoking situations, take all possible precautions, and face the situation fortified with plans for coping if the fears are realized. And Julie Norham at Wellesley some 40 years ago researched this and gave it the name defensive pessimism, and I have a poster that says I'm her poster child for defensive pessimism. This strategy of defensive pessimism controls debilitating anxiety. So anxiety-prone people like me can function better and keep moving forward, while also driving everyone around me nuts, and then I'm okay and they're not. As a card-carrying defensive pessimist, I'm not paralyzed by COVID-19 anxiety. This is from 2020, of course. Armed with defensive gear, my husband and I go forth into the fray. We take walks and chat with masked friends, and I go into masked friends at the farmer's market. I even stopped washing the groceries. If we suspect exposure, we will get tested. I am pleased to see defensive pessimism catch on in America, where negativity, even negativity that helps many function better and can save lives, has been frowned upon. This summer, I note the influx of cars with plates from COVID-laden states. With vacation land on Maine license plates expressing unwelcoming sentiments to vacationers and/or refugees would be both ironic and heartless. But as a Bronx-bred defensive pessimist who carries extra masks, I'm happy to offer one cheerfully to any non-masked person standing next to me in line. Okay, so here's the next one. December 8th, 2021, also in the Press Herald. Do any of you remember Aldo Llorente? Yeah. As college students across Maine, our Uncommon College doctor removed mental health therapy stigma on campus and off. As college students across Maine head home for winter break, I think about the family of the bright and promising Bowdoin College student whose suicide was unthinkable. As a Bowdoin psychology professor emerita, I wonder how this tragedy might have been prevented. According to the American College Health Association Spring 2019 summary, 66% of college students experienced overwhelming anxiety. That's compared to 51% in 2011. 58% felt hopeless compared to 47% in 2011. 46% felt too depressed to function compared to 32% in 2011. And 14% seriously considered suicide compared to 7% in 2011. So those are pretty scary statistics. A Harvard Medical School assistant psychiatry professor, the executive director of Mass General's Clay Center for Young Healthy Minds, and a Clay Center research assistant noted that 80 to 90% of the over 1,100 college students who die by suicide each year had received no college counseling help. The stigma of mental illness is the greatest barrier to seeking help, they said. Aldo Llorente, MD, the Brunswick psychiatrist who directed Bowdoin's Counseling Center from 1997 to 1986, understood the problem. He destigmatized mental health treatment. There were no known suicidal events during his tenure. Here was his approach. At first-year orientation, Aldo greeted students with these words: "Students, do your best. And I'm going to insert something in here. He would say, in high school, you were all in the top 10% of your class, but now that you're at Bowdoin, don't worry about grades because 50% of you will be in the top half of the class and 50% in the bottom half of your class. This undeniable truth, in this undeniable truth, he set the tone for his de-stressing, destigmatizing campaign. Play pool with Aldo, assessment without stigma. Aldo played pool with students on campus at regular designated times each week. Any student, with or without mental health problems, could play. Students flocked to the pool table, students who needed help, students who didn't need help, students who had a friend they thought needed help. Let's go play pool with Aldo. Where Aldo assessed some students discreetly, no one knew whom Aldo assessed. He talked to all pool players alike and considered 3 levels of treatment. Level 1, 24-hour respite. Students suffering from excessive stress is an intensifying problem, Aldo reported in the 1977-78 President's Report. Such students were treated to what we all called Aldo's Spa on the top floor of what used to be the Health Center. I don't know what it's next door. I don't know what it's called now. And Aldo's Spa consisted in a bubble bath, milk, cookies, and a sedative, ensuring a good 10 to 12 hours of sleep. That got most students back on track. Second, conventional treatment. Students with ongoing problems were offered counseling and/or medication, what you typically think of. And third, local inpatient psychiatric unit. Students who needed more intensive care were referred to the short-term voluntary 13-bed psychiatric unit at Brunswick Midcoast Hospital. Then it was called Regional Memorial, right? Okay, medical leave was a last resort. In 1986, Aldo left Bowdoin to head that local psychiatric unit, where his innovation continued. In what he called his wrap-up group each evening, patients settled on a conversation topic themselves so that they could, as Aldo put it, sit at the donut shop counter downtown and talk about anything but their mental illness to the person sitting next to them, as Aldo himself put it. And I thought, like, this was genius. They were not allowed to talk about their problems. Have you ever heard of a therapy group where you can talk about anything but your problems? I hadn't, but it was remarkably successful. And we met a lot of his patients downtown at the donut shop who didn't talk to us about his problems, their problems. Aldo created a practicum for students in my abnormal psychology course. The 14 undergraduates visited in pairs weekly, offering occupational therapist-approved activities like guitar playing sing-alongs, origami, baking, painting. Patients knew the students' confidentiality training and could opt to stay in their rooms, but that rarely happened. The patients, it turned out, were as curious about the students as the students were about the patients, which makes perfect sense. Occasionally, practicum students encountered a Bowdoin student on the unit. One year, a student in my practicum course became a patient on the unit. So that student had been going as a student volunteer in my course to do occupational therapy stuff with the patients and then became a patient. Hospitalized students, hospitalized students unfailingly found that chatting with the practicum students was a non-stigmatizing way to transition back to campus. Aldo also helped members of the community informally. In 1986, I suffered searing headaches upon recovering from influenza, although I later learned that that winter's flu strain caused viral meningitis. I had already been traumatized by the weeks of undiagnosed pain. Aldo visited me at home regularly, just to keep me company as I recovered. I memorialized his reassuring presence in my invited NPR This I Believe essay, which I delivered on air. And in the sheet you have with the op-ed about Aldo, there's a link that you can go to and hear me deliver that. And the title of that was A Positive Attitude is Overrated. Aldo Lorente died in 1995 at age 68. Adding to his many, many friends and family at the memorial service were dozens of his former patients, eager to pay respect to this most talented, dedicated, and beloved psychiatrist. The uncommonly successful methods created by Aldo Lorente cannot be implemented readily in our HIPAA-infused treatment-regulated times. Yet some college counselors might be inspired to adapt his methods nonetheless, to normalize and so destigmatize the process of getting help. Desperate times call for innovative measures, including long-lost but tried and true ones. And now, before I read my the last op-ed I'm going to read to you, my sister Roberta Held, whom we call Bert, is going to speak for a minute about what I was like as a little kid, so when I read the next op-ed, you have evidence, my favorite thing, that I didn't make it up. Take it away, Bert.
Taking it away.
I know you do.
Barbara was a pain in the ass when we were kids. She wouldn't go outside. She hated nature. It was evil. She wouldn't get dirty. She wouldn't come find me in the high snow. We moved to New Jersey when I was 3, and there was a big snowstorm, and my mother couldn't find me because they had plowed so high, and she kept calling my name, and I didn't answer. And she said, Barbara out. And Barbara was not very happy with me at the time. She was just I don't even know how to say it other than just she was a pain in the ass. She asked a million questions. Didn't like the answer, so asked the questions again. Didn't like the answer, so asked the questions again. Until my mother finally said to her, why do you keep asking me this question in a different way multiple times? And she said, because I want to make sure I get the right answer. So she was a challenge growing up. And even though I'm younger by 3 years, she did a number. She was just difficult to deal with, as she is now. Right? You agree?
Okay.
Okay.
You want to go on?
No. You want to take?
Give her a hand. Did you just burp?
No.
Oh. Bert asked me what time will we be leaving this event? And I said, well, I'm supposed to stop this by 1:30, but I don't know if anyone wants to hang around and talk some with me afterward. And she said, well, what if they'd rather talk to me than you? So some of it rubbed off. All right, the Santa question. This is a true story. New York Daily News, December 15th, 2020. Psychological advice about what to tell children about Santa abounds, some practical, some moralistic, but this year there's a novel coronavirus twist. Can Santa fly around a COVID-infected world safely? Will he have to wear a mask? If he gets infected in a chimney in Minnesota, will he carry the virus from house to house, leaving it on a glass of milk left out in Texas? We have to worry. The daunting and depressing difficulties of the 2020 holiday season brought to mind my own preschool Santa reckoning. It was the Bronx, December 1953. I was a couple months short of 4. My first-generation Jewish-American parents were keen to integrate us into mainstream American culture. So was my Romanian-born great-grandfather who gave us chocolate Santas. We had a tabletop Christmas tree under which were both my Christmas and my Hanukkah presents. We saw the window displays at Saks Fifth Avenue, the Rockettes at Radio City Music Hall, and the grand tree at Rockefeller Center. We went to meet Santa at Macy's. In a photo of me taken then just before the big reveal, the skepticism is apparent on my face. My parents kept that picture on the wall their whole lives, and now I have it. And because they thought this is the essence of Barbara. Notice I'm not scared. I'm just like, no, I don't think so. My husband just like, this is the best picture of me. Then a lump of coal appeared. I spotted in the kitchen garbage can, this is still the Bronx, the letter to Santa I had dictated to my father, which was like a week after this. We went to Macy's, and then a week later, I dictated this letter to my father. I couldn't read yet, but I recognized it and realized it wouldn't get to the big man in the garbage can. So, I confronted my parents with the letter. They were used to rough questioning from their truth-seeking child, so they confessed. They knew they had no choice, and they said, Santa isn't a real person, he's make-believe. And I said, do I still get presents? And they said, yes. And I said, how? And they said, we buy them. Cool. For this little New Yorker, the truth about Santa was no problem. Then, like a day later, after the letter I found, I went to preschool, which I hated because they didn't teach me to read, and I wanted to learn to read, and I thought it was for babies. But a Santa visited my preschool to hear our requests and distribute candy-filled stockings. The teacher gave him a chair at the front of the room, and I can remember it. She had some kind of platform, and she put a chair on it. He sat on this platform, and we lined up in front of him. And they were about 23 and 4-year-olds. I stepped out of line, I was about in the middle, I can still see this, to announce what I had learned at home. Santa is make-believe. Sitting up there is just a man in a Santa costume, I announced. I applied some of my parents' teachings. We don't know him, so that man in our classroom is a stranger trying to give little kids candy. And what do we do in this situation? We say, no thanks. The other kids got it immediately. This was the Bronx. We all knew never to take candy from strangers. We weren't even supposed to talk to strangers. My classmates asked me the same question I asked my parents. Do we still get presents? Yes. How? Your parents buy them. Okay then, the kid said, no problem, cool. And so began the entire class's boycott of Santa. All of them. I stepped out of line. I can't believe I did this at almost 4. I drew a line with my foot and said, everyone who thinks we shouldn't take candy or talk to this strange man, come to this side of the room. And they all did. Once everyone knew that they get presents, like, hello, like we're following this rule. Deducing I was the ringleader, the Santa stranger begged me to sit on his lap and recite my list, hoping the other kids would follow suit. He even promised not to give me candy. I said that we also weren't supposed to talk to men. We didn't know. It's not just the candy. I can't talk to you either. The teacher chastised me, but I wouldn't budge. Neither did the other kids, who also knew right from wrong. So our classroom Santa went on to his next gig with extra candy in tow. The teacher called my parents in. Of course, I didn't know that then, but years later they told me about it, and told them that she had gotten complaints from other parents who said I ruined Christmas for their children. She said I should be punished. My parents refused, insisting that I deserve praise for trying in my preschool mind to save children from candy-luring strangers. I knew I hadn't ruined Christmas for those kids, but maybe their parents needed Santa more than they did. What and whether to tell children about Santa is, of course, a personal parenting decision. Before presenting the Santa myth as reality, however, we adults might ask ourselves for whom we're doing it, our children or ourselves. We might also think about some surprising truths. Santa is real. He's real in just the same way that Sherlock Holmes and Peter Pan are real, as beloved fictional characters. Santa could be introduced to children in just this way. As philosopher Amy Thomason explains, once created, fictional characters are in the world. The arts, literary, visual, performative, are important for many reasons, including their ability to expand our experience of the world and ourselves. So stories, fictional or factual, matter. This includes stories about Santa. My husband and I have 3 Christmas trees and the menorah my grandmother gave me in 1953. We believe in Santa and the seasonal spirit of giving. Whatever one's spiritual views, this is surely what Santa best represents. The idea of giving made real. Giving not only in tangible form, but also in sharing stories, can help break through the loneliness during the holidays, creating ties that are sorely needed this year, this first year of COVID, when so many are distanced from families and from friends. Thank you.